Welcome to the debate. Picture this. You're standing at a lever. A runaway train is just barreling down the tracks.
The classic setup, right?
Exactly. If you do nothing, it hits 5 strangers. But if you pull the lever, it diverts and hits 1 stranger.
We all know it.
Every Philosophy 101 class covers it.
Right, and when we talk about this classic trolley problem in a classroom, it's entirely abstract. It's clean.
It's mathematical.
Yeah, it's a brutal logic puzzle designed to be detached.
But, then you step into the shoes of an 18-year-old girl standing on a cliff in a massive storm, and suddenly that abstract puzzle is just violently shattered.
Because the variables change.
Completely. Because the one person tied to that other track isn't a stranger. It's your soulmate. It's your best friend. It is the person you love most in the entire world. And in that rain-soaked moment, all that clean utilitarian math completely breaks down.
Which brings us to the core of our discussion today. We're diving into a choice today that has haunted players for, over a decade now?
11 years, yeah.
11 years. And let's be clear from the jump here, this isn't just an analytical discussion about narrative design or, branching dialogue trees.
Oh, definitely not.
No, this is a deeply personal, fiercely emotional clash between 2 massive fans of Life is Strange. We are tackling the final, agonizing decision of the game. Sacrifice Chloe or sacrifice Arcadia Bay.
The infamous Bay versus Bay divide. 11 years later, and the community is still split straight down the middle. It's wild.
It really is.
We're drawing directly from the source material today, plus those intense community theories that have raged online, and some really fascinating behind-the-scenes insights from the developers.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We do. But before we get into the psychology of it all, we need to put our cards on the table. When you were standing on that cliff holding the controller, where did you stand?
Well, I chose Bay over Bay. I sacrificed Chloe.
Wow. I knew it, but hearing it still hurts.
I know. And I want to be completely honest, it was devastating. I sat there staring at the screen, listening to the storm howl, and I genuinely felt sick to my stomach making that choice.
It's a physically uncomfortable moment.
Truly. But I felt it was the absolute only way to accept the consequences of altering time. Max had manipulated reality to a breaking point.
Sure, she pushed it too far.
Right, and letting Chloe go was the only way to save thousands of innocent lives from a hurricane that essentially Max's powers had pulled into existence.
You felt responsible.
Exactly. It felt like the terrible, necessary price of adulthood. Stepping out of the fantasy that you can save everyone and doing the brutal thing that saves the most people. But what about you?
Oh, I fall firmly, unapologetically on the side of Bay over Bay. I saved Chloe.
No hesitation?
I didn't even hesitate. When I played my own game, the emotional bond that Max and Chloe built over that week, all the trauma they survived, the quiet moments of connection, it was simply too vital to sever.
Even with a tornado bearing down on the town?
Yes. For me, tearing up that butterfly photo was an act of ultimate love. I am not sacrificing my person for a town that has done nothing but chew her up and spit her out.
But you're choosing a single life over thousands. You're looking at a town full of families, children.
I know the math.
People you spent the whole week trying to help, like Kate Marsh, like Joyce at the diner. And you're saying their lives are worth less than Chloe's?
I'm saying the choice shouldn't be viewed through cold, detached logic. Max Caulfield is an 18-year-old high school student. She's not a superhero.
She literally has superpowers, though.
But she isn't a hardened general making wartime calculations. Choosing Chloe is a deeply human emotional response to finding your person in a chaotic world.
I just don't think you can ignore the cost of that.
It's about realizing that true love doesn't follow a moral spreadsheet. The game isn't asking you to be perfect. It's asking you to be honest. And honestly, when it comes down to the person who anchors your soul, you save them.
You protect them.
You protect them. Even if the world burns.
See, I look at the underlying themes the game has been building since episode 1. The entire core of Life is Strange is a coming-of-age story.
Okay, I agree with that.
Right. It's about learning that you cannot control everything, no matter how desperately you want to. Max gets this godlike power to rewind time.
Which she uses to save Chloe.
Initially, yes. But every time she uses it to fix a problem, she creates a bigger fracture in reality.
The butterfly effect.
Exactly. Chloe's death in that bathroom, while profoundly tragic, is the necessary consequence of fixing a broken timeline. Choosing the bay isn't just about math.
Then what is it about?
It's the ultimate act of taking responsibility. Saving Arcadia Bay is Max leaving the safety of childhood and facing unyielding reality.
Okay, let's actually talk about that concept of maturity in childhood, because the source material brings up an incredible point about how a player's real-life age profoundly shifts their perspective on this exact choice.
Oh, the Reddit account story?
Yes, there's an account from a fan in the community discussions who shared a really revealing story. They first played the game at age 15.
Okay.
And at 15, they chose the Bay ending. They sacrificed Chloe. Why? Because to a teenager, it seemed like the, quote, correct moral choice.
The utilitarian choice.
Right. It's what society and Marvel movies tell you is right. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. You make the big hero play.
Because it is the hero play. I mean, you put your own desires aside to save innocent people.
But wait for the second half of the story. This same player played the game again at age 26.
11 years later.
11 years later. In those intervening years, they grew up, they got married, they found their wife, their best friend, their absolute person.
Right.
And at 26, playing that final scene again, they chose Bay. They chose Chloe.
They flipped their choice entirely?
Entirely. Because living out in the real adult world taught them that they would absolutely sacrifice the entire world for the love of their life.
That's a very romantic way to look at mass destruction.
But it's true. Finding that deep human connection altered their entire moral framework. The abstract idea of the many suddenly meant nothing compared to the concrete one they loved. True adulthood isn't about rigid utilitarianism.
I disagree.
It's about fiercely protecting your found family.
See, I read that same account, and I have to say, I fundamentally reject the idea that shifting toward the selfish choice is inherently a sign of maturity.
Calling it selfish is so reductive, though.
But is it actually more mature to say, I am going to let thousands of innocent people die a terrifying death just to spare myself the personal grief of losing my partner?
When you put it like that,
That doesn't sound like maturity to me. That sounds like a retreat into tribalism. It sounds like avoiding the absolute hardest part of growing up.
which is what?
Realizing the world doesn't revolve around you and your immediate circle. The By ending represents looking at the devastation your choices have caused, looking at Joyce, who is about to drown in a diner, looking at Kate, who you worked so hard to talk off the roof, and saying, I have to stop this.
It is incredibly easy to be a utilitarian philosopher when the victims are abstract.
They aren't abstract. We spent 5 episodes with them.
But when you're sitting in a classroom or when you're 15 playing a video game and treating the NPCs like numbers on a spreadsheet, of course you say you'd save the 5 strangers over the one.
I didn't treat them like numbers. I cared about them.
I know you did, but real, mature love alters the trolley problem completely. When it is your soulmate tied to those tracks, the math breaks down. The brain actually shifts from systemic thinking to empathetic devotion. You do not owe the universe a blood sacrifice to balance the scales.
But you are playing God if you choose Chloe. You are actively deciding that her life is worth more than the entire population of Arcadia Bay. You are flipping the switch on the trolley to run over an entire town.
Let's look at the expectations placed on the protagonist here, though. The TV Tropes analysis from our sources brings up a brilliant comparison about how we as gamers are conditioned to view these choices.
The Commander Shepard argument?
Right. They call it the Commander Shepard argument from the Mass Effect series. Think about who Commander Shepard is.
The super soldier.
Exactly. A hardened military leader charged with solving massive galactic problems. In those games, you are constantly navigating scenarios that the sources call a Zerg rush or a Macros missile massacre.
We should probably define those for anyone who isn't deep into gaming terminology.
Good call, yeah.
So a Zerg rush comes from StarCraft. It's when a player floods the map with a massive swarm of cheap, weak units to overwhelm the opponent. It essentially reduces living beings to pure disposable numbers.
Just cannon fodder.
Right. And a Macros missile massacre is that classic anime trope where hundreds of missiles fill the sky, guaranteeing massive indiscriminate destruction.
Exactly. Now, in those scenarios, a character like Commander Shepard is expected to make cold military calculations. The sources call it the brutal calculus.
Meaning doing the math on human lives?
Right. If Shepard has to sacrifice a squad mate to save a planetary colony, that is literally part of the job description. We are trained as gamers to make the brutal calculus because we usually play as military badasses.
That is fair. We are used to playing heroes with a capital H.
But Max Caulfield? Look at who she actually is. Max is a shy, introverted photography nerd. The sources explicitly point out she is an, quote, actual pacifist, unquote, who physically recoils at violence.
She's a high schooler trying to navigate cliques in art class, yes.
The most risky thing she would have ever considered before this week was sneaking into the school pool for a midnight swim.
True.
She is not equipped, nor should she be expected, to execute the brutal calculus. The game is asking the player a meta question. Are you going to force this 18-year-old girl to act like a hardened military commander?
Or are you going to let her be a kid?
Right, or are you going to role play as an actual teenager who acts with her heart?
But ignoring the brutal calculus doesn't make the math go away. The storm is real. The bodies will be real.
I'm not saying the storm isn't real.
But Max might be an 18-year-old pacifist, but she has been granted the power of a god. Whether she wants that burden or not, she has it. She isn't a blank slate.
She didn't ask for it.
It doesn't matter. By choosing Bay, she becomes directly responsible for an atrocity. Is it fair to let hundreds of people die a horrifying, terrifying death just because Max couldn't step up and be the hero the universe demanded?
The universe demanded her best friend's blood.
Making that brutal calculus, bearing the weight of that trauma so others don't have to die, is exactly what Max needs to do to truly grow up and take responsibility for the timeline she broke.
If you want to talk about trauma, let's look at the ending cutscenes themselves. The game's cinematic direction heavily supports the psychological toll of forcing that brutal calculus on Max.
The endings are both incredibly sad.
Have you watched both endings side by side recently?
Of course. It's rough.
If you sacrifice Chloe, the cutscene is essentially a what the hell player montage.
That's a good way to put it.
It is utterly devastating. Max is huddled in the corner of that bathroom, weeping uncontrollably, shaking while she listens to Nathan shoot Chloe.
It's agonizing to watch.
She's completely, utterly broken at the funeral. But if you save Chloe, yes, they are driving through the ruined, destroyed streets of Arcadia Bay. It is deeply sad.
It's a graveyard.
But look at Max's face. Max actually smiles slightly at the end. She is intact. She didn't lose her true companion. The abstract loss of the town, as horrific as it is, doesn't break her psyche the way the visceral, concrete execution of her soulmate does.
A slight smile of relief doesn't absolve her of the atrocity.
I'm not saying it absolves her. I'm talking about her mental state.
Of course she's broken in the bathroom. She's listening to her best friend get murdered and she has to physically stop herself from intervening.
But you have to look beyond Max's immediate comfort. It's more than comfort. It's her sanity.
But choosing the Bay isn't just Max's choice, it is Chloe's choice.
Oh, I knew we would get to this.
We have to. If you're listening right now and screaming at your dashboard that Max shouldn't have to be a hero, remember who offers the sacrifice. On that cliff, Chloe explicitly offers her own life.
She does.
She hands Max the butterfly photo. She says that her mom deserves to live, that the town doesn't deserve to be wiped out for her.
And you take her at her word?
Yes! Chloe finally steps out of her selfish, rebellious, destructive phase and grows into a genuinely selfless hero. By tearing up that photo, Max is silencing Chloe's agency. You are robbing Chloe of her defining moment of redemption.
Okay, if you're going to bring up Chloe's agency, we have to talk about the short straw theory.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
Because it's essential. This is one of the most fascinating deep dives from the community sources. And it completely dismantles the idea that Chloe offering her life is a pure act of clear-eyed heroism.
I've seen this theory floating around Reddit. It basically argues Chloe's choice is invalid.
It argues her judgment is severely compromised, and it brings receipts. Let's look at the evidence. The theory posits that whenever Chloe is given a choice between self-preservation and self-incrimination, she inherently draws the short straw for herself.
Meaning she always takes the blame.
Exactly. She punishes herself instinctively. Look at the farewell bonus episode. Max and Chloe are kids.
Max accidentally breaks a post on the staircase in the Price household.
Right, a minor accident.
It's super minor. William, Chloe's dad, is a handyman who loves fixing things. It's not a big deal. But what does Chloe do? She takes the blame. She immediately jumps in front of the train and takes the blame for Max. There is absolutely no reason to do so, but she instinctively takes the heat.
But kids cover for each other all the time. That's just loyalty. That's friendship.
Sure, but it's the beginning of a pattern. Fast forward a few years. William is dead. Her home life is in shambles. Her mother, Joyce, and her volatile stepfather, David, constantly make her feel like a delinquent, a burden, a second choice.
David is a piece of work.
David literally installs surveillance cameras and tells her she can't be trusted. Think about the scene where Chloe tries to sincerely thank David at Blackwell. She puts her guard down and tries to be genuine.
That scene is so hard to watch.
David flat out refuses to believe her. And what is Chloe's reaction? She doesn't get angry at David's toxic judgment. She turns it inward.
She breaks down.
She questions herself. She apologizes to Joyce for making her choose between her and David. She internalizes all the blame.
She's dealing with a terrible stepfather and immense grief. Yes, she's a troubled teenager.
It is much deeper than teenage rebellion. It is profound, untreated trauma. Look at the dialogue in the junkyard. Chloe explicitly tells Max she wants to blame her dad for dying so she doesn't have to blame herself.
Which is a very common grief response.
Exactly, but she irrationally blames herself for her father's random, tragic car crash. She blames herself for Max leaving for Seattle and ghosting her. She thinks she is inherently broken.
She carries a lot of guilt.
So cut back to the cliff in the storm. Despite having absolutely no scientific or logical way of knowing that she is directly responsible for a supernatural hurricane, she immediately takes the blame for it.
She says she ruins everything.
Yes, I ruin everything. Therefore, this storm is my fault. The short straw theory argues passionately that Chloe offering to die isn't heroism. It's a tragic trauma response from a severely depressed, suicidal girl who has spent years feeling worthless.
Man, that is a heavy interpretation.
It is heavy because it's true. Taking her up on her offer, allowing a traumatized girl to sacrifice herself because she thinks she's a burden to the world, is a heartbreaking mistake.
I don't think she thinks she's just a burden in that moment.
You aren't honoring her agency by letting her die. You are validating her darkest fear that she is worth more dead than alive.
I understand the psychological framing there. I really do. And the trauma she carries is undeniably real. But I have to push back on the conclusion.
How can you push back on that?
Because I cannot accept that reducing her final, beautiful moment of clarity to a mere trauma response is the right way to view her character. Doing that strips Chloe of her ultimate growth.
How is it gross to commit suicide by supernatural groxy?
Because throughout the entire game, Chloe is angry. She lashes out. She acts selfishly.
She has reasons to be angry.
She steals money from the handicap fund. She gets mad when Max answers a desperate phone call from Kate Marsh. She spends the whole week railing against Arcadia Bay, wanting to watch it burn.
She's a hurt kid.
But on the cliff, the anger breaks. She finally looks past her own pain. She sees the diner where her mother works. She sees the innocent people trapped in the storm. She realizes her life isn't worth the destruction of thousands.
Or she just reverts to hating herself.
No. Calling that just a trauma response infantilizes her. It says she isn't capable of moral reasoning. It's the one time she truly sees the bigger picture. She isn't acting out of self-loathing. She's acting out a profound love for her mother and her town.
Does she see the bigger picture, or is she just defaulting to her oldest defense mechanism? Think about what Choosing the Bay's ending actually communicates to Chloe.
That her life is worth a whole town.
Max is the only person who has consistently proven to Chloe that she has value, that she is worth fighting for. By tearing up that photo, Max is finally proving to Chloe that she doesn't have to be the sacrificial lamb.
That is a very poetic way to frame letting a town drown.
She isn't a mistake. It is the ultimate definitive validation of Chloe's worth.
At the cost of Joyce's life, the woman Chloe is explicitly trying to save in that moment.
I know.
Max denying Chloe the chance to save her own mother is incredibly heavy. Imagine the guilt Chloe has to live with, driving out of that town, knowing her mother died because Max wouldn't let her go.
It is heavy. The permanence of this choice, the sheer unyielding weight of it, is what makes it so agonizing, which actually leads us into a piece of behind-the-scenes history that I find incredibly revealing about human psychology.
Oh, we're talking about the data mine?
Yes, because players struggled so much with this heavy binary choice, save your love or save the town, the community, desperately searched for a third option.
People hate binary choices in games like this.
They do. They wanted a middle ground where both Chloe and the town somehow survive.
And they actually found evidence of one. Data miners digging through the game files found early concept art by Gary Jamrose Palma that revealed a cut hospital ending.
The holy grail for the Bay fans, the hospital ending.
Originally, if you chose the sacrifice Chloe path instead of attending her funeral in the rain, the scene would have faded in on Max waking up in a hospital room.
Okay, paint the picture.
She's sitting next to a bed, and Chloe is lying there in a coma. The narrative would have been that Nathan still shoots her in the bathroom, but she survives the gunshot.
So she doesn't die?
Right. The town is saved because the timeline resets, but Chloe isn't dead, she's just gravely injured and recovering.
Which is such a massive shift in tone.
Interestingly enough, one of the sources mentions that Kate Marsh was only added to this hospital scene later on in development because fans loved her so much in Episode 2, so the developers wanted to show she survived too.
It sounds like the perfect compromise, honestly. You get to fix a timeline, you save the Bay, you save Joyce, but you don't have to bury your best friend. The ultimate win-win scenario.
But co-director Michelle Coach explicitly addressed why they cut this from the final game.
What did he say?
He said that during the writing process, they realized leaving Chloe in a coma was a massive cop-out.
A cop-out? Wow.
It offered too much hope. If you were making the momentous, soul-crushing decision to sacrifice Chloe to save Arcadia Bay, they felt they couldn't give the player a lifeline.
They had to force the pain.
They had to go all the way to really offer an absolute end. It would completely reduce the emotional impact of the player's choice if there was a loophole where you kind of get everything you want.
And honestly, as much as my heart breaks at the idea of the Bay ending, I have to agree with the directors on this one.
Really? I thought you'd love the hospital ending.
Oh, I would have chosen it in a heartbeat if it was an option. But from a narrative design perspective, forcing the player to make a permanent, devastating sacrifice is the only way the narrative holds its weight.
It forces you to commit to your philosophy.
Exactly. If there was a happy middle ground, if Chloe just went into a coma and woke up later, the fierce Bay versus Bay debate wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be sitting here talking about it 11 years later.
No, it would just be the definitive good ending.
Right. The brilliance of the game is that it refuses to let you off the hook.
The integrity of the entire experience relies on the absolute necessity of consequence. Every time you rewind time in the game, you avoid a consequence.
That's the core mechanic, yeah.
The ending is the game finally saying, no more, and that brutal finality is reflected in the global statistics. Over the years, the worldwide choice data has shifted back and forth, hovering around 55-45 or 52-48.
It's crazy how close it is.
It is an almost perfect split down the middle of the player base.
Which is wild for a video game. Usually there is a clear, good ending that, 80% of players gravitate toward.
Like saving the little sisters in BioShock.
Exactly. The fact that human brains split so evenly on this shows how deeply this game understands human nature. Half of us are wired for systemic, utilitarian logic. We have to save the most lives.
The Bay choosers.
Right. The other half of us are wired for fierce, empathetic loyalty. We protect our tribe at all costs. The Bay ending is about the messy, selfish, deeply beautiful reality of profound love.
If you frame it that way, sure.
It's about looking at a broken world, looking at the person who makes life worth living, and choosing to hold on to that light. Consequences be damned.
And the Bay ending is about the heartbreaking maturity of accepting loss. It's about realizing that love sometimes requires the ultimate sacrifice.
It's letting go.
It is. And that true heroism doesn't mean clinging to the one you love, but finding the unimaginable strength to let them go so others can live.
I think we can definitely agree that the reason this debate endures is because neither choice is a traditional video game win. You don't get a gold trophy and a happy parade.
No parade in Arcadia Bay, that's for sure.
Both choices leave Max Caulfield and the player forever changed.
It's a reflection of life itself. Sometimes there are no right answers. There are no perfect loopholes.
Just consequences.
There are only choices, and the immense weight of having to live with them.
Which brings us back to where we started. To that set of train tracks, to the rain pouring down on that cliff.
It all comes down to that final button press.
We've laid out the psychological profiles, the trauma theories, the developer intentions, the brutal calculus. But ultimately, the final decision falls to the individual holding the controller.
So we have to ask.
So to everyone listening to us right now, as you drive to work or sit in your living room, we leave you with this. If you woke up tomorrow with Max's power and had to make the same choice about someone you love, what would you choose?
Thank you for exploring the emotional depths of Life is Strange with us.
Until next time, keep pondering the tracks ahead.